Hi everybody, how are you? Welcome to today's session. We are continuing with a series of 100 Not Out where we are doing 100 para-based questions which will be very critical from exams point of view. So let's start with today's session. Before we begin, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Juhi Narula. I have 12 years of experience in training students for CAT, GMAT and GRE. I also happen to be a life skills coach and a content creator. I've done my bachelor's in technology and master's in business administration. This is the Telegram channel. Please join the Telegram channel so that you get the notifications for all the upcoming sessions and classes which I take. I take sessions Monday to Friday on Unacademy's app, which we call special classes at 9 a.m. Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. on CAT for MBA, where we are currently having our series 100 Not Out. And I take Genesis batch Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 11 p.m. on Unacademy CAT channel. So let's see what do we offer apart from our special classes and free YouTube sessions. We have two subscriptions which help you immensely crack your preparation for the entrance exams that you're aspiring for. We call the subscriptions Plus and Iconic. So in Plus subscription, there are live classes, there are weekly tests, study material is provided. There is unlimited access to the session. So say for instance, you've enrolled for one batch, that doesn't mean that once that batch gets over, you cannot attend classes in other batches. You can attend as many courses and as many batches within your subscription period. We also have a very interesting feature where the courses are structured. So whenever we talk about competitive exams, it is very important to understand that our preparation remains to be structured. So in Plus subscription, you get all these amazing benefits. Apart from Plus subscription, we have also Iconic subscription, which has got all the benefits of Plus. Apart from this, there would be a personal coach who's going to handhold you in your entire journey of preparation. There's a detailed study planner which is provided, which is created by doing bi-weekly reviews. So it is absolutely customized, meeting your requirements. Then there is one-on-one live mentoring, detailed test analysis, which is a very important aspect of any preparation. And there is another very interesting feature where there is expert guidance provided. So there will be result boosting workshops periodically so that you are able to ace your performance. Now this remains to be the fees. So if you're going for 6 months subscription, the fees is 16,400. And if you're going for 18 months subscription at this point of time, then the fees is 28,550. For 24 months, the fees is 60, there's a 60% off and the fees is 32,800. If you are going for Iconic subscription, the fees for 6 months is 25,800. For 12 months, it is 39,500. And for 24 months, it is 59,999. Please don't forget to use the code JNLive10 to get a 10% off on any of the subscriptions. So let's get started. So in today's session, we are going to solve a reading comprehension followed by a few questions. So let's start reading. While we solve reading comprehensions, I put a lot of emphasis on three important aspects. One, rightly reading the passage that you have got, deconstructing the question nicely, understanding the question nicely, and the third important thing is that you deal with answer choices effectively. So always remember, if you want to score good marks in verbal, it is very important that you learn the art of elimination. While we read the passage, it is very important that we keep our focus intact because that's a major challenge that students encounter. Second is, for all the questions which are based on overall understanding of the text, we should be able to answer those questions without revisiting the text, because say if the question is asking you a primary purpose or main idea, and in order to answer the question you revisit the entire text, so it would be basically a lot of time which we can't invest, right? So please keep this in mind, that rereading the passage multiple times actually creates a lot of pressure and doesn't provide much of the benefit. Another important thing that you need to keep in mind, for specific questions, which can be retrieval questions or inference questions or specific purpose questions or vocabulary and context questions, we will definitely come back. That brings in better clarity. Of course, if you have this expectation that in one go you will be able to retain everything that you have read, that too under the stress of exam and time, then this is actually an unreal expectation that you're setting for yourself. For specific questions, it is always advised to come back, but you should know where to go back. At times we see students wandering in the passage, so that basically creates a lot of trouble, and that creates a lot of pressure leading to inaccurate answers, so that we wouldn't want. So let's quickly get started. Let's read this particular paragraph, then once you are done with it, we are going to move to the next passage. Start reading it. So see, whenever we are reading the passage, I would always advise you to go for mapping. What is mapping? Just identify what remains to be important and write, scratch it down. Don't get into making notes because that would consume a lot of time, but keep on highlighting the important parts, important terms, proper nouns, or if you feel that there can be a question created, there's a high possibility you can mark it so that it is easy to track the answers when we are dealing with the questions. So let's quickly start reading. Current feminist theory in validating women's own stories of their experience has encouraged scholars of women history to view the use of oral narratives as methodology next to the use of women's written autobiography that brings historians closest to the reality of women's lives. So can you see the length of the statement? So this is how competitive exams create pressure. You'll find such lengthy statements. So you need to understand that what is the discussion all about. So they are basically trying to say that women's oral narrative, so people who are under current feminist theory, where we are trying to validate women's own stories of their own experience, right? So we can encourage the scholars who are undertaking the study to consider women's oral narratives as methodology. So one is that where there are women who have written autobiography. So next to that, we can also consider women's oral narratives as the methodology. So scholars who are studying, who are, under the feminist theory, who are studying the women's perspective, right? So this is the discussion all about. Always go slow with the first few lines because they introduce what is the discussion going to be. So we know that there is this idea suggested that women's oral narratives as the methodology can be used to study. For the scholars who are under current feminist theory, they can research and study by taking the perspective of women's oral narratives. Now, such narratives, unlike most, so always observe transition words. They are important clues and they help you really get the better grasp of the passage. Such narratives, unlike most of standard history. So here the author is trying to create a contrast between the existing, oral narratives and how they are different from standard histories. What do? They represent experience from the perspective of women, affirm the importance of women's contribution, and furnish present day women with historical continuity that is essential to their identity individually and collectively. So, this is basically telling that how these narratives are different from standard histories and how they help, right? So, maybe you can write that there is the importance of such narratives. If the question comes like which of the following narrate points are favorable when we consider women's oral narratives to be scholars agenda of study, we can refer back to the first paragraph last lines. So this is how mapping will help, and whenever we are reading the paragraph, we should always be in active reading and not in passive reading. So passive reading is when you are dormant, when you are not trying to identify that what can be the type of questions that I can encounter. You're just reading without comprehending. So don't try to retain. Of course, if you'll try to retain all these advantages or all these points, it will be a hassle and definitely you are going to miss on certain points. So the best advice is that if the question is created, you would know where to get back to get the right answer. So we can understand from this particular paragraph that we are talking about women's oral narrative narratives as methodology. And another important criteria is that when we talk about such narratives, how these are different from standard histories and how they provide input. So I hope this is clear. Let's move to the next paragraph of the same passage, read it, and then we are going to move to the questions. While you're reading, please ensure that you observe transition words, you do some scratch paper work. That will definitely help you build better focus while you are dealing with the paragraph. That's again a huge challenge that we often encounter. So when we read this passage, scholars of women's history should, however, be cautious as about accepting oral narratives at face value, as they already are about written memories. So now there is a transition word, and the transition word does what the previous sentence was talking about, the advantages. Now people who are considering, who are scholars of women history, they should be a little careful while they are accepting oral narratives. Now how then these statements are explaining? Oral narratives are no more likely than our written narratives to provide a disinterested commentary on events of people. So, one point raised as to why the people who are, scholars who are studying women history should be cautious while they are dealing with oral narratives. Now, take a look at this particular word, moreover. So, that means the author is trying to build the discussion. So, another reason to be cautious. So, there can be questions that what are the points the author has raised, that one should be cautious while dealing with oral narratives, so we know where to go back. The stories people tell to explain themselves are shaped by narrative devices and storytelling conventions, as well as by other cultural and historical factors in which storytellers may be unaware. So they are saying that, when people are trying to explain the story, they might be driven by narrative devices, or they can be, impacted by cultural and historical factors. The political rhetoric of particular era, for example, may influence women's interpretation of the significance of their experience. So, how the political rhetoric of a particular era can create an impact, the sentence explains. Thus, a woman who views the Second World War as pivotal in increasing the social acceptance of women's paid work outside the home may reach that conclusion partly and unwittingly because of wartime rhetoric encouraging a positive view of women's participation in such work. So, this is an example that is provided how the political influence can bring an impact on the oral narratives. So if we try to get an overview of the passage, it talked about that how the under current feminist theory, scholars can consider oral narratives, what are the advantages of oral narratives and how they are different from standard histories. That's this paragraph talking about. And the second paragraph talks about that what can be the certain parameters for which the person who's observing oral narrative should be careful about. Then there are few points presented and an example presented to conclude the particular explanation. So once we have the control of the passage, once we know what is the overview of the discussion, we can definitely move to the questions. So let's see the questions the passage is primarily concerned with. So that means the question is trying to ask why the author has written the entire passage. So this is basically a primary purpose question. Primary purpose question means what is the intent of writing the entire discussion. So if we take a look at the A answer choice, contrasting the benefits of one methodology with the benefits of another. So it's not contrasting, it is just making aware that how one should be cautious when we are dealing with oral narratives. So we can eliminate this choice. Describe the historical origins. So nowhere origins has been talked about. So this answer choice is out of scope. We can eliminate this. Discussing the appeal of a particular methodology. Yes, we are talking about oral narratives and how the benefits act and some concerns about its use. So yes, the author has said that one should be cautious, and what are the points on which the researchers and scholars should be cautious, those points have been explained. So we can keep this answer choice. Never take a final call till you explore all the answer choices. Come to D, showing that some historians' adoption of a particular methodology has led to criticism of recent historical scholarship. No, we can't say. This is again out of scope. Analyzing the influence of current feminist views on women's interpretation of their experience. Again, recycled language can be very easily eliminated. So that is the importance of mapping. If you are clear with the flow of ideas, then picking up the answer choices for general questions would be relatively a very easy task. So the answer to this question will be C. Let's move to the next question. According to the passage, which of the following shapes the oral narratives of women storytellers? Now, see, according to the passage, this means this is a retrieval question, right? So let's take a look that what are the parameters that shape the oral narrative. So if you would want, you can go back to the passage, refer back to the information and get clarity. So let's take a look at the answer choices. The conventions for standard histories in the culture in which the women storyteller lives. So the conventions for standard histories is irrelevant, goes out. The conventions of storytelling in the culture in which a woman storyteller lives. So yes, this is basically supported from the text. If you would keep this in mind, that moreover the stories people tell to explain themselves are shaped by narrative devices and storytelling conventions as well as other cultural and historical factors. So going back to the text definitely brings better clarity, brings better accuracy, and then we are sorted. There would be no scope of confusion. We can definitely keep this answer choice. A woman storyteller's experience with distinctive traditions of storytelling. So this is irrelevant, goes out. The cultural expectations we have nowhere talked about. This can be very easily eliminated. A woman's storyteller's familiarity with the stories that members of other group in her culture try to explain themselves. Again, very easy elimination. So the correct answer is going to be B for this question. Let's move to the next question. Now, see, this is a very interesting question. The author of the passage would be most likely to make which of the following recommendations to scholars of women history? So, women scholars who are studying oral narratives and other ways to understand women's history under current feminist theory, what would the author possibly recommend, right? Most likely to make. So we can understand the concept and primary purpose of the idea. So for such questions, we don't know where to go back. It is based on the overall understanding. So we'll take a look at the answer choices. They should take into account their own life experiences. So why a person who's studying women's history would take into account their own life experiences, right? So this is irrelevant. They should assume that observations made in women oral narratives are believed by the intended audience of the story. So they should assume. Why would they assume when they're actually getting into the research and studies? So assumption is something that it cannot be, reasoned out. It is something that you will take for granted to establish the conclusion. So this goes out. They should treat skeptically observations reported unless the observations can be confirmed in standard histories. The author is said to be cautious, he is not said to be skeptical. So this will be extreme than the claim made by the author. We can eliminate C. They should consider the cultural and historical context, which the previous question just talked about, in which an oral narrative was created before arriving at interpretation. So, like the previous question directly conveyed, that whenever a person is narrating the story, then the cultural and historical factors and political factors influence the storytelling. So the author would possibly suggest the scholars to take this aspect into consideration. So we can keep this answer choice. They should rely on information gathered from oral narratives only when equivalent information is not available in standard histories. Again, an extreme answer choice. So, good ground of elimination. So, we are going to go for D as an answer. Let's move to the next question. Which of the following best describes the function of the last paragraph or last sentence of the passage? So it is always wise to go back, reread the line to get better understanding, better acceptance. And if we read the sentence, does a woman who views the Second World War as pivotal? So you can see the previous statement talks about the political rhetoric of a particular era may influence women's interpretation, right? Of the significance of their experience. And then this point is elaborated by this example. There's a woman who views the Second World War as pivotal, as important in increasing the social acceptance of women's paid work outside home. right? So women started working outside at that point of time, and this was considered important, may reach that conclusion partly and unwittingly because of wartime rhetoric encouraging a positive view of women's participation in such work. So how the impact is created may be elaborated by an example. So once we are clear, now see, we are clear with the question, we don't have the pressure to understand the entire paragraph or the passage offered by you, and we're specifically revisiting the information, so you can imagine the sort of accuracy you're going to get. It describes an event that historians view as crucial in recent history. It's a trap answer choice. It provides an example of how political rhetoric may influence the interpretations. That's what the previous statement said, and then it was an example elaborated. We can definitely keep this answer choice. It provides an example of an oral narrative that inaccurately describes. So, inaccurately, we can't say, it illustrates the point. So till here the answer is correct. Maybe till here it illustrates the point that some women are more aware than others of the social forces. No such comparison. So this choice can be eliminated on this ground. It identifies the historical conditions that led to social acceptance of women's paid work outside the home. No, that's not what the intent is. The intent is to provide an example of how political rhetoric created an influence. So this choice can also be eliminated. The correct answer to this question is going to be B. Let's see this particular question. According to the passage, scholars of women history should refrain from doing which of the following? So you can go back to the text. Relying on traditional historical resources when women's oral narratives are unavailable, we can't say. Focusing on the influence of political rhetoric. So focusing on influence of political rhetoric, nowhere, it's saying we should refrain from doing so. So this can also be eliminated. Attempt to discover cultural and historical factors that the author is trying to suggest that this should be done. So the question is saying what should be refrained, should not be done, right? Assuming that conventions of women's written autobiographies are similar. So that's what the initial paragraph said, that oral narratives next to autobiographies. So this can be very easily eliminated. That's the beauty of POE. Keep on eliminating the incorrect choices. Whatever remains shall serve as the right answer. If you can read the answer choice, it will be absolutely correct. Bang on. Come to the last question. According to the passage, each of the following is a difference between women's oral narratives and more standard histories. So if you would want, you can go back to the passage, refer to the first paragraph, get better clarity and come back to the text, right? So we can go back. There is no harm. It is always wise to refer to the text to get better clarity, and that's here the discussion was made. So that's the importance of mapping and reading it in an active fashion, so that tracing down the information is an easier task. Such narratives, unlike most standard histories, so the points have been presented, represent experience from perspective of women, affirm the importance of women's contribution, and furnish present day women with historical continuity that is essential to their identity individually and collectively. Now you have gathered the information. Now you can take a look at the answer choices and eliminate the incorrect ones, reach to the right answer. Women's oral histories validate the significance of women's achievement. Remember, we are talking about except. This was mentioned, cannot be the answer. Women's oral histories depict experience from point of view of women. We can keep this. I mean, this is correct. So this has been talked about. Women's oral history acknowledge the influence of well-known women. So well-known woman has not been talked about. This can possibly be an answer. Women's oral history presents today's women with the sense of their historical relationship clearly mentioned. Women's oral histories are crucial to collective identity. That's what the last point said. So even this is mentioned. So what is not mentioned? C. So C would be the correct answer. I hope you enjoyed solving today's passage. So we are going to continue with a series of 100 not out, where we are going to solve 100 para-based questions. Keep practicing, keep working hard, and don't forget to join the sessions. I take sessions Monday to Friday at 9 a.m. on Unacademy's platform. Also, the sessions happen from Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. on CAT for MBA, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Genesis batch at Unacademy CAT 11 p.m. Please take care. All the best. God bless you. Stay consistent.